What's up, y'all? Talon here. Today I'm going to be doing a ranking of all the starter Pokemon in the Regulation H format. So if you weren't aware, the Regulation H format is the official Double Battle VGC format for the next couple of months between September and January 5th, I believe. So this format basically is notable in that it's banning all Paradox and Legendary Pokemon, meaning the stats of the starter Pokemon, which are usually kind of mediocre, are actually pretty solid right now. So there's a lot more viable starter Pokemon than they typically are, beyond the typical Rillaboom and Incineroar that are pretty much the only viable starters. Otherwise, we're actually seeing a lot of the other starter Pokemon having a pretty notable role in the metagame. So I thought it'd be a good idea to rank them, just since a surprising amount of them have been doing pretty well in ways you might not actually expect if you've been playing the game, even for a pretty long time. So if you enjoy the video, please leave a like. Let me know in the comments below which Pokemon you think I ranked slightly, too high or too low. Let me know why. And yeah, with all that being said, let's get into a breakdown of these Pokemon. So I'm going to start low. I think D tier is going to be pretty bad. I'll repopulate the F tier at the end. Right now it's kind of just where everything is, but Meganium, pretty bad. Best it can do is maybe Leech Seed stall some Pokemon, but there are better things that can do that. I think even Chestnut with Bulletproof would be better, even though there are some better Chestnut sets overall. Yeah, it's going to be a D tier for me. I think Emboar also going to be D tier. If you're looking for a slow Trick Room Sweeper, you can probably just use Torkoal. You could be going for Physical Reckless on the Emboar, but I think the damage output just isn't there compared to something like a Torkoal, which just hits very hard. Like, you can hit Incineroar, I guess, but I think going to be a very, probably an F tier by the end of this. And Teleon, I think very similarly, is going to be a very low pick for me. So its one value is it's a fast water type Pokemon, but the problem is, you can go for a fast water pledge, but I'm not entirely sure that's that valuable because the pledge move, basically the stronger of the two, or rather the Pokemon who moves second, their special attack is the one that activates for it. So it's fine to have like a Meowscarada as your faster Pokemon, which is going to end up being a better Pokemon in more situations overall than the Inteleon. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure. It's probably the best water pledge lead Pokemon. Actually, even Greninja is better than it. It's definitely very bad. But yeah, you could go for like Scopeland, Sniper, Focus Energy, and be doing 3 times damage with your crits 50% of the time, or I guess it would be 100% of the time because of these Scopelands, but overall not a Pokemon I think is going to be especially strong. Speaking of the Greninja, we'll just populate it here. I think, although Protean or Protean, there's also Libero or Libero, depending on which part of the world you're from, but I do think the Greninja, it can go for Water Shuriken next to an Annihilate or something that is Choice Scarf, and give it a fair bit of Rage Fist boost while still running the Choice Scarf on the Annihilate, because the priority +1 on the Water Shuriken, pretty cool there. So if you see that in the GC, you see Greninja and Annihilate, good chance it could be that, but I think Smeargle can also do this while still having better utility options. So I do think Greninja is going to be a D tier Pokemon overall. Next, I want to actually pick on Delphox here. This list is kind of ordered, kind of unordered. Like, the Pokemon down here are kind of just like palette cleansers, all kind of bad. But yeah, Delphox is a Pokemon that I think is actually very solid this metagame. It actually just won a large, pretty competitive League Cup in New York, or around the New York area, maybe New Jersey, not sure. But it had players like James Evans, Chippa Cross, very strong region there, and it was able to beat all of them on a cool team with Tailwind and a Indeedee. So essentially this was a expanding force, pretty fast Delphox with Terra Blast, Terra Fighting to beat the Dark types that would otherwise switch in on it. So overall, it's a pretty cool Pokemon. I think it might be underrated right now, but it's definitely on a few people's radar after that big win. Next we'll go Blastoise, which is a Pokemon that is borderline viable. I think the Shell Smash plus Water Spout is definitely something that is very, could actually rip through a lot of teams. Unfortunately, the Grassy Glad on a Pokemon like Rillaboom do cause it some problems just hitting it through the defense boost, but you could go for a defense, or hitting them through the defense drop. But you could go for a defensive tear to get around that. That's not out of the question, but overall, probably not a Pokemon that will carry you to victory all the time if you can set it up effectively, but something that, could be pretty fun and a solid option at some points. You can also go Fake Out Water Spout as a more, maybe slower Trick Room oriented Blastoise. So overall, has some options in the metagame. I think because the power level is so low, a very strong water type spread move like Water Spout plus Shell Smash could actually end up being viable. Next, we'll get some rejects out of the way once again. The Feraligatr, although you have Sheer Force plus Waterfall, and then probably Crunch and some other moves, I think you are missing something that can beat you're basically choosing whether you're going to be able to beat Primarina or something like that, other water type Pokemon with a Grass Terra, or if you're going to be able to beat Grass Pokemon with a Ice or Flying Terra essentially. And I just don't think the power on this Pokemon is that good. Anything it can hit super effectively can tear out of it, and you won't be able to cover it without, I'm not really sure. I think you could maybe see some Dragon Dance doing okay, but I think overall it's probably going to be a D tier, maybe F tier Pokemon at the end. And then Decidueye is wholly outclassed by Decidueye Hisui. We'll get to that, but yeah, that's going to be a low Pokemon. Same with Samurott. The Hisuian one is able to do everything it can while still having like another offensive stab in the Dark type, while being a solid switch into Expanding Forces, which is really valuable. I think there's really no reason, unless you're like really caring about the fighting and fairy weakness on the Hisuian Samurott, to want to use the original over it. Cinderace is a tragic tale because honestly it was pretty good in one of the it was the series back in Sword and Shield, where I think it was one of the more limited dexes, but the max Airstream, Pyro Ball, max Knuckle, and then maybe a Dark type move to boost up special attackers, I want to say it was a pretty solid set. Unfortunately, without Dynamax, the power just isn't really there. The speed's okay, but I think there are better fast special attackers, and they're usually spread type attackers, or also have some utility that I don't think the Cinderace really has. Unfortunately, the court change not that effective in double battle, so I think overall it's going to be a low D tier, F tier type Pokemon. Alright, and now just to get it out of the way, I think the last kind of dumpster tier Pokemon is Swampert. You do have water, ice, earth, or ground coverage with like Earth Power. I don't know if it learns Scald anymore, probably not, and then Ice Beam, which is good coverage, but it probably just gets outdone by Gastrodon, which also has a better ability in Storm Drain, Clear Smog for Dondozo. So I don't think the Swampert is especially strong. I think it's pretty outclassed unless you want Wide Guard, which I'm not really sure what you would want that for. I guess Make It Rain, but I do think Swampert very, very niche, probably like one of the worst starter Pokemon in my opinion in this meta. Typhlosion is fun, but unfortunately, although it has a bit more speed than opposing Typhlosion, or the Hisuian Typhlosion, it has worse special attack and a little bit better bulk, but it doesn't really matter because you can get Fake Outed. You have to run Covert Cloak if you want to run it, or like Terra Ghost to not get Fake Outed on lead by like an Incineroar, or something if you want to run an offensive choice set like the Typhlosion Hisui does. And for that reason, I think the Hisuian Typhlosion is miles better. It's just like such a great Pokemon on Hyper Offense. You don't even need a terrain to block a Fake Out. You have that embedded in your typing. You can go for Terra Fire Eruption, deal crazy damage with a Sunny Day partner. I think the Hisuian Typhlosion is borderline S tier. I think right now it's S tier, but as the format progresses, it's probably going to be a little closer to A tier as people just have options baked into their teams a bit better for this Pokemon. Quaquaval is an interesting pick. I think it's probably going to be closer to like maybe C tier, probably D tier, but could be low C tier. Essentially, this Pokemon's main value is Moxie over a like water breed Tauros, which has Intimidate and better stats overall. Moxie plus Aqua Step means you can, in one turn, if you take a knockout, get a attack boost and a speed boost, and basically just start sweeping your opponent's team with close combat as well. It also has Aqua Jet, but at that point, you're kind of treading the same water as a Tauros, pun intended. I think maybe a little bit better is the Brave Bird set, where you can go for Terraflying Brave Bird and basically check all the water type or the grass types like Rillaboom and Amoonguss that would otherwise be a pain for a Tauros. So that's probably where I see its niche lying, but yeah, not a great Pokemon overall. I think just going down the evolution, or at least the generation line, I'm going to talk about Skeledirge now, which I think is also going to be a C tier for me, but pretty high on C tier. So Skeledirge's main role is actually to be a Dondozo check. You wouldn't believe it just based on the fire type, but if you preserve your Terastallization for a water or a fairy type, you can kind of just wall out the Order Up, Earthquake, and Wave Crash set and get a Will-O-Wisp off with your Unaware. So you're ignoring their special defense boost and their attack boost to get the Will-O-Wisp off. You slack off, heal any damage, and then just slowly start racking up damage with Torch Song and Shadow Ball to eventually be able to knock out the rest of their team after being set up with the Torch Songs, essentially. So it's a really strong Pokemon in certain situations, and then other times it's kind of just walled, but I could see some defensive teams using it to good effect at some point in the year. Next, we'll talk about the Charizard. Not good, unfortunately. I think it's similar to Typhlosion, where it's just overwhelmingly worse than Typhlosion Hisui. As a Sun Pokemon in Tailwind, basically Solar Power is going to chip you down way too quickly, where you can just like knock it out with a Sucker Punch from a King Gambit or something later in the game without having to worry too much. Lack of immunity to Fake Out naturally means you have to commit to Terra Ghost potentially, which lowers your damage output going for Terra Fire. You could run Covert Cloak, but at that point, like, why are you not just running the Typhlosion Hisui that's naturally immune to the Fake Outs? That's kind of the issue. The only real value here is the Air Slash on the Charizard. Maybe Hurricane and Rain, I guess, could be something, but overall, it's not a Pokemon I particularly think has a chance to do very well this format. Typhlosion's Eruption is just way, way higher value overall. Next, we have the Torterra, which is like borderline C tier, but I think will end up in the D tier overall. Better than the rest of these guys, which are basically just going to move down to F tier whenever I get rid of the rest of the Pokemon in it right now. But basically, it is a Shell Smash user first and foremost. I think the Loaded Dice Rock Blast plus Bullet Seed set could be solid, along with Headlong Rush. The problem is you're not very defensive on that set, so you're going to be taking a lot of damage. Overall, it's like an okay Pokemon. I think it does have its niches. Like, you can Rock Blast a Pelipper, knock it out. You can go for Headlong Rush into the Archaludon. There are some matchups where it's pretty cute, but overall, I think it is, as far as Shell Smash users go, I'd rather have the Blastoise set up than the Torterra, just because I can go for spread damage and make the most of it instead of be locked into like single target damage on the Torterra. So speaking of Torterra's friends, let's talk about Empoleon and Infernape. Empoleon is, I think, probably underrated right now, but it might end up being pretty solid. I think I'll end up putting it, maybe, it's probably like low C tier, but I think as Incineroar gets more popular right now, it's actually pretty low usage, but as formats progress, that's usually the case where Incineroar isn't that good early on, but gets better as the format progresses, as we figure out how to play more defensively. As that happens, the competitive ability on Empoleon is going to become more and more valuable, getting a +2 special attack boost if intimidated or otherwise stat dropped, I believe. So that's pretty cool. I do think that the Empoleon's defensive typing, it pairs pretty well, or it does pretty well against Primarina, basically walls out the water and fairy type damage. It's also able to resist Rillaboom a little bit better, sit on the field, could do some cool things that way. I think overall it's a Pokemon I do have my eye on as one that's not going to be very good early on, but maybe something to revisit later on as the format progresses. Now we'll talk about the last of the Sinnoh Pokemon. We will go Infernape. I think Infernape is actually C tier and being slept on a little bit. It does have some good utility, fast overheat, fast close combat, pretty useful tools, fake out, close combat. You have Feint, I think, which is a solid option that not a lot of Pokemon in the metagame have, but maybe a scrappy Flamigo is a little bit better for that. You also have Wide Guard, you have Quick Guard. Actually, maybe not Wide Guard, but you have Quick Guard. It might be largely overshadowed by Flamigo, but I do think that, the fire typing could be important in some situations, so I feel like maybe it's closer to D tier, thinking about the Flamigo overlap a little bit better, but yeah, overall a Pokemon that is better than I think people are giving it credit for right now. Another Pokemon I think that might be a little underrated right now is Serperior. It is really fast in the meta, and the combination of Leaf Storm and Contrary raising its special attack to +2, along with its strong natural bulk, means it's like pretty bulky and can ramp up pretty quickly as a setup attacker. You also have the option to go for Stellar Terra Blast, which normally lowers the special attack and attack of your Pokemon by one stage, but for Serperior, it actually raises it because of Contrary. So you're basically able to go for one Leaf Storm and then have an unresisted Terra Blast against all the other Pokemon that just gets you even further in the boost department. So cool Pokemon there. You can also go for Fast Glare, Light Screens, etc., while also having the Leaf Storm capability. Haven't seen a great proof of concept yet, but something that could be solid later on in the format, I think. I think it is finally time to just put the elephant on the room on the tier list, the Incineroar. I'm not sure I don't necessarily think it's an S tier Pokemon yet, but I think by the end of the format it definitely will be. I think inherently it is stronger than the Typhlosion right now. It is just like so bulky. The Dark type is really important against Psychic type teams. I think the Safety Goggles Parting Shot stuff is like strong, but maybe not as strong. I could see a shift to Assault Vest to take advantage of the attacking stat of the Incineroar a little bit more. Fire coverage seems pretty strong against a lot of the metagame, truthfully. Whereas in the past, you could basically run multiple support moves on the Incineroar and get away with it because you just only needed one attack move. I think the Flare Blitz is coming back into vogue a little bit, and as people figure that out, the Incineroar will be a little bit stronger. I think, going to be an A tier, maybe S tier as the year progresses, but we'll stick A tier for now. Now let's get to Rillaboom, which is, I think, the best fake-out user in the format, for sure. The ability to overturn Psychic Terrain is definitely super valuable against Trick Room strategies, or at least Trick Room strategies with the Scythe Spam. I have a Delphox in B tier for crying out loud. You have to acknowledge how nutty that strategy is. It's winning a lot of online tournaments, so having a Pokemon like the Rillaboom that has some passive counterplay against that with the grassy terrain later in the battle is really, really strong in my opinion. So I think based off that alone, it'll probably be A tier, but having the option to pressure one of the few grass types and outspeed it and knock it out, the Primarina with a Woodhammer, or force the Terra is definitely appreciated on a lot of teams. Overall, just a great Pokemon. Going to be S tier there. Then the Primarina, just explaining that a little bit. It's strong for sure. It has good stats, but I think one of the main values of it is a Haze Dondozo answer. If you pair it with the Rillaboom, you're not weak to Earthquake, you're not even neutral to it, so you don't have to burn a Terra for that. If they're a Terra Grass, Terra Blast Dondozo, you can go for a Terra Water on the Primarina. And then pretty much regardless, if you get a free Fake Out, switch into while the Dondozo is like not knocking out your Pre-Marina and they're not Covert Cloak, next turn you can just go for Fake Out plus Haze and completely eliminate their boost. Next turn, go for Woodhammer, knock out the Dondozo, Moonblast the Tatsugiri on follow-up, and that's 2 Pokemon down. So I think the ability of Pre-Marina just to be a very non-committal Dondozo check is something a lot of people are gravitating toward right now. I think for me, it's definitely the strongest Water-type starter on this list. There is only one other Water-type Pokemon to speak of, though, and it is the Hisuian Samurott. I think this Pokemon is vastly overrated, and people still think it's pretty bad. I've never really had much trouble playing against this Pokemon. The Sacred Sword's fine. You can go for a Sharpness plus Scope Lens, Night Slash set if you want to. You can take advantage of Ceaseless Edge Spikes if you want. Razor Shell, these are all moves boosted by Sharpness. But overall, the bulk is just really bad. The typing defensively is pretty weak as well. So I think, going to be D tier. Please stop using this Pokemon. I just trying to save people time here. I think for the most part, I just really have been unimpressed by this Pokemon from people testing it and just playing against it. I'm going to go into Sceptile now, which has Dragon Cheer. I'm not actually sure if it learned Shed Tail or if that was from some other Pokemon. But overall, yeah, a strong option overall if you have like a Dragon type partner like a Goldengo, a Choice Specs Terra Dragon Goldengo, you could imagine. If you go for a Dragon Cheer Terra Dragon, suddenly you have a high critting Make It Rain that's not going to be, if you crit, you're not going to be worrying about the special attack drops. It's also a strong defensive typing, so I could see that being pretty cute overall, but not going to be something that's super consistent, in my opinion. Working my way down the list, Venusaur I think is a C tier. It's really worse as a Chlorophyll user next to Torkoal, in my opinion. Like, there's better things like Jump Bluff, there's Lilligant that can basically just use it on Trick Room composition, go for After You Eruptions, but I think it could be solid with the... Oh god, rain just started coming down. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but yeah, I do feel like the Venusaur is a little stronger with the Ninetales variants of the Sun than the Torkoal versions, but overall not that strong. Sleep Powder good. You can force out basically something like a Terra Grass or Chaladon to go for Terra Grass in front of Sleep Powder to not get put asleep, and then you can Sludge Bomb it. You can also go for Earth Power for a lot of damage into Steel type, so it is like pretty well statted in the format. I think the bulk is decent. It's not great, but it's decent, and you can go for a Covert Cloak Sleep Powder set with a lot of offensive utility as well, so I think it is better than D tier, but I think like mid C tier feels kind of safe to me. Blaziken is another Pokemon that might be being underwritten right now. I think it is C tier, probably better than Blastoise, I'd have to imagine. Basically, what it can go for, it could go for a Focus Energy, Scope Lens, Overheat, or a Sphere set, or maybe an offensive physical one, I guess, but you benefit from the Overheat, just critting through regardless a little bit more. I do think that there's also a Coaching Speed Boost set that has some viability. I played someone running that, plus a Metagross, which was pretty tricky to take down. It's a Pokemon that, Speed Boost usually isn't that good. It's usually not that great of a Pokemon, but I could see it having some usage here. Probably better than Blastoise. I think maybe I'm underrating Venusaur a little bit here. Let's go middle of C tier. Meowscarada does really well with Flower Trick. It's probably the best, or not Flower Trick, Grass Pledge. Flower Trick is definitely great, but it's the best fast Grass Pledge user Pokemon in my opinion, just because it doesn't have to be going for that strategy. The Flower Trick and Knockoff or Sucker Punch are also pretty good. Choice Band seems like a great strategy on it as well. It gets access to a lot of strong moves like U-Turn, Flower Trick, Knockoff, Sucker Punch, Triple Axle. Lots of great options here. You could even go Low Kick if you want to deal with King Gambit a little bit better. Great utility on this Pokemon. It's also like a tricky Focus Sash Trick Room user that can function in and out of Tailwind. Like you can have it on the Tailwind team with one other slow Pokemon. And basically in a GC, you just go for Trick Room plus Focus Sash and surprise some people that way. I think it's a strong Pokemon. I think probably maybe better than Delphox by a little bit, but I don't know. Maybe even worse, honestly. Like the Rillaboom makes it a lot harder to justify the Meowscarada on your team, in my opinion, but overall, it's a pretty cool Pokemon. I'd say maybe a little bit better than Meowscarada, or better than Delphox, but it's hard to say. Chestnut is not a Pokemon I paid a lot of mind, but apparently there's a Belly Drum Grassy Glide set with Rillaboom that's going around. Pretty good. You have Bulletproof plus a Terra Steel or Terra Fire Terra, typically to resist Make It Rain. So you'll basically be able to wall out a Goldengo, which would otherwise try and set up on you, and then just knock it out with 2 Grassy Glides, I imagine. You also have Drain Punch. It's a very bulky Pokemon, so you can go for the Belly Drum, get a couple Grassy Terrain healings, and then Drain Punches and be back up to full. So Pokemon that's pretty good. I think it's probably it's probably better than Blastoise. Maybe worse than Blaziken overall, though. So last Pokemon on the list is going to be Decidueye, which is a kind of standout success this format. Previously, it hasn't had pretty much any usage, but the triple arrows plus Scrappy being able to knock out a Gold Mango, whether they go for Terra Steel or not, is pretty cool. You have natural resistance to Dondozo's Wave Crash. You can go for Haze, or just a Scope Lens Leaf Blade to get a 50% crit to deal with that. Triple arrows is just a pretty cool move. If you have it in Tailwind, a very high chance to flinch, crit, and then lower defense stat of your opposing Pokemon. So that's a cool move overall. I think it's probably like worse than Delphox, honestly. Yeah, I think that's probably how that shakes out. Let's maybe start looking at the low tiers. I would say it's probably about Torterra, where you start saying Pokemon are just like completely unviable to use, or like you're trolling to use them. Let's try not to order this too much, but yeah, this is probably about the tier list I would go with. I do think the Primarina and the Rillaboom are the most splashable on both balance and offensive compositions. Incineroar is going to get better as the year goes on and is probably an S tier Pokemon, truthfully. Typhlosion, very good early on. I think going to be one of the more dominant archetypes at the first couple of regionals before people figure out the format defensively. And then Delphox could be a surprise pick with the Expanding Force plus high speed, allowing it to gain a niche over the Armarouge, which is a little bit slower, a little bit more Trick Room oriented as a Fire Psychic. And then Meowscarada kind of falling from grace. It used to be a S or A tier Pokemon as a very linear answer to Dondozo. But as we have gotten better at Scarlet and Violet, I feel like Dondozo has been a little bit easier to handle, as well as just having better tools in the meta to handle it as the dex has expanded. So overall, I do think this is going to be my final tier list. At least for now. The format will, of course, expand. If you want to see an updated tier list later on in the format, let me know in the comments below. Let me know, of course, if you disagree with any of my picks, think I'm missing anything, or think something might be overrated. Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Regulation H content. And with all that being said, peace, y'all.